Hey everybody, hope you're all doing well. My name is Steven, and this is the Storytime channel. Today we have some pro-revenge stories, and our first story of the day is by Anonymous. Half-brothers threatened to sue me over $16,000. It cost them $158,000 and possibly their parents' marriage. When I, 25-year-old female, was 3, my grandparents passed away. They set up a savings account in my name. The account was meant to be accessed by me when I was 21. At that point, it contained just over $300,000. My grandparents left me a letter saying they would like me to share the money fairly with any other Smith-Jones children, meaning my full siblings. Dad's a Smith, Mom's a Jones. By fairly, they meant that they wanted me to assess the situation and judge for myself what was fair. I never had full siblings, but I have 2 half-brothers, Mac and Joe Smith, who are dad and stepmom's kids. Due to the specific wording my grandparents used, I legally never had to give Mac or Joe any money. However, I see Mac and Joe as my brothers, and as the money came from our grandparents, I felt that the fairest thing would be to assign each of us $100,000. So we all got an equal-sized lump sum, and I figured that when Mac, the youngest, turned 21 and took his $100,000, we could split any remaining money. When I turned 21, Dad suggested I buy a house with my $100,000. I found a place I loved, but it was $130,000 and I couldn't get a mortgage. So Dad said I should borrow $30,000 from the account. I did, figuring I could pay it back before my brothers turned 21, and I have been repaying it. The account should be at $208,000 right now, but due to me withdrawing and then repaying that money, it's at $195,000. So I still owe $13,000. Joe turned 21 recently. And as I was giving him his $100,000, Joe noticed that there was less in the account than there should be. I explained and said I was going to put it all back before Mac, now 19, turns 21. Joe told Mac, and both boys said I stole from them and owed them the full $13,000 back, plus $3,000 of interest that they felt they would have gotten. And they wanted it all paid by this summer, which gave me less than 6 months to bring the account up to $211,000. I said I'd do it, but over 2 years as planned. The boys then wrote up a contract to that effect. I went to sign it until I saw that it said 6 months to pay it all back. I wouldn't sign as we agreed on 2 years. They said I should figure it out as they were entitled to that money and would be seeking legal advice. Later that day, I got an email, clearly written by them, saying that they intend to sue me for the $16,000 plus whatever is currently in the account, and additional damages and emotional distress on top of that. At this point in time, I'd given Joe about $50,000 of his $100,000 because he wanted it in installments. I responded that legally, they were never entitled to any of it, and given their attitudes, I'd say they've already received an amount I deem fair. So that $50,000 was all they were getting. I then got a barrage of texts, calls, and emails yelling at me for going back on our deal. I blocked them. They then took to social media, saying that I was trying to screw them out of their inheritance and rallying our extended family into harassing me over this. And it mostly worked, as a lot of people messaged me. However, I got a message from this guy called Chris Smith. Chris said he was 27 and claimed to be my half-brother. I had never met him before, but he sent me photos of him as a kid with our dad, grandparents, and me. He showed me that he also had an account with $150,000 in it, and a scan of a letter from our grandparents saying this money was meant to be shared fairly among Dad's illegitimate children. Chris also told me we have another half-sibling who is 18. He'd been looking for me for a while, but only found me when Dad shared Joe's post, which had me tagged. We checked with a solicitor to make sure, and as the boys are legitimate, they aren't entitled to anything in Chris's illegitimate kid fund. And as they are my half-siblings, they aren't entitled to anything in my Smith-Jones kids fund either. I sent the boys a letter formally telling them to back off, stop posting about me online, and enjoy the $50,000 because it's all they're getting. The day they received the letter, Chris got a PM from Dad asking if the boys can have some of Chris's fund. Chris also said no and told Dad we'd met. I told Mac and Joe about Chris and our other half-sibling with Chris's permission. So it looks like my grandparents, knowing about Chris before they passed, set up 2 funds. One for the kids Dad had with my mother, who was still his wife when they passed, and one for children born out of Dad's affairs, presumably to make sure no one else tried to screw anyone else over out of hurt feelings. I'm getting a lot of crap, but holding firm on my decision. The boys have realized that I won't back down on this, and it sounds like I've caused a schism at their house, as Joe has all the money and no intention of sharing, so Mac is now feeling twice as screwed. Plus, stepmom apparently did not know about the other half-siblings, or that my half-sister was born after she and Dad got married, and she's made Dad move into a hotel. It sounds like Dad is looking for a long-term living arrangement outside of the family home, because it looks like she's not letting him move back in. Dad is begging me to reconsider, but honestly, I'm done with all of them except Chris and my sister. That's kind of the sad reality of money. Having all that money and all of your relatives knowing you have that money, they start trying to do whatever they can to make sure they can get as much as possible. If this happened to you involving people in your family, would you find it hard to completely cut them off? Let me know in the comments down below. Our next story is by Raptor Blues. Trash your own manager and department? You get to do a presentation. Chad was an engineer with a planning and support department for a portion of his company's infrastructure that impacted virtually every other part of the company. Unfortunately, Chad was a real jerk. During less than a year with the company, he had thoroughly trashed everyone in his department to anyone who would listen. He talked about their incompetence, their screw-ups, which were generally minor, and most importantly, their failure to properly support the very mission-critical infrastructure they were responsible for. Every hiccup that occurred, however minor, was used as ammunition. What Chad told everyone who would listen eventually made it up to the managers and directors throughout the company. That wasn't enough though. Chad made the mistake of trashing his own director, who was also his manager. Over the next few months, there was no one even remotely involved with his department who didn't know what Chad was doing, including that manager. Chad's manager and director was Tim, a pretty crappy manager by most measures. He paid about 40% less than the industry average and had a staff of B and C players because of it. But he nevertheless expected absolute dedication from that staff. If he could have had them wash his car and pick up his dry cleaning, those things would have been added to their job descriptions. Tim was also pretty poor when it came to understanding what his own staff did and routinely made things up about their work while talking to other people. Everyone involved knew he was full of crap because what he said made no sense at all. Most rolled their eyes, but people also knew that Tim was a force to be reckoned with. Despite his shortcomings as a manager, the one place Tim excelled was corporate politics. He was able to consistently come through failures without a scratch when those failures would have sidelined anyone else. Tim would deftly play opponents off one another, then stand back and watch the fireworks. He had been at it for years and seemed to have a Teflon coating. Crap that stuck to everyone around him would slide right off Tim. Tim, of course, knew exactly what Chad had been saying. Eventually, Chad's trashing of his own department became so severe and their reputation so tarnished that a large directors meeting was called to discuss the situation. The other department's directors were out for blood. Enter Tim's pro-revenge. Tim tasked Chad, the very person responsible for the company gossip that resulted in the high-level meeting, with the job of putting together and then presenting a formal defense against his own gossip. Chad had to spend the next couple of weeks creating a formal presentation and repeatedly submitting it to Tim for approval. The meeting rolled around and Chad was forced to stand up in front of a large group of company directors and managers and formally defend his own manager and department. Everyone at the meeting knew they were only there because of what Chad had been saying, and they sat back and watched him tear himself apart and prove the things he, himself, had been telling everyone were flat-out lies. Of course, Tim and his department came through completely unscathed. But Chad was thoroughly discredited throughout the company and knew it. He left that company for another within 6 months of that meeting, and last was heard bad-mouthing everyone involved with his new company. Chad thought he was hot stuff, bad-mouthing everybody, just completely putting down his whole department, probably thinking he was top dog and nobody can get past him. But surprise, the people higher up than Chad are just like Chad, but even better than Chad at what Chad tries to do. Tim was playing the same game but was 2 steps ahead and made Chad look like an absolute fool. This next story is by Patico CR. Don't park in my brother-in-law's spot. My girlfriend's brother, my brother-in-law, has been seeing his girlfriend for a few months. She lives in a 4-apartment complex with 4 unsheltered parking spots. Each tenant is entitled to use one for his or her own car or a visit. Also, there are 2 special spots under a roof with an individual lockable gate that are closer to the apartments. If you want to use one of these, you have to rent it for an additional monthly fee. Since my brother-in-law is now a regular visitor and one of the special spots was available, he and her girlfriend decided to rent it. She would park there on a daily basis, and he would park in the regular spot. However, this one neighbor decided he could use this special spot if it was not occupied when he came home, since the gate is now open. The first time, they talked to him and he apologized. Second time, he says he was in a hurry and was just about to leave. Third time, the landlord was informed and they had a long talk about it. Well, last Saturday when my brother-in-law and his girlfriend arrived, neighbor's car was parked in the gated spot. No need to talk this time. My brother-in-law closed the gate and locked it with his own padlock. Coincidentally, they decided it would be a nice day to take a trip. They picked up some things from the apartment and left for a weekend trip. Of course, they had to block the neighbor's number on their phones. On Sunday night, back home, they found the neighbor was pissed. His car was locked, they would not answer his calls, and the landlord didn't give a duck about his problem for the entire weekend. If I came back and noticed that they were parked in that spot, I'd make the plans for the day trip right then and there, call them and try and leave a voice message or maybe send a text that's like, "Hey, I noticed you wanted to use the gated spot that I pay for again. Don't make a habit of it, but don't worry. I went ahead and locked it up. I'm gonna be gone all weekend, but your car will be safe. See you soon." Then you block them and you head on out. Our next story is by Royal Hummingbird, The April Fool's Pranks of 92 and 93. This is a funny revenge that I got to be involved in a minor way. One of my favorite stories of April Fool's Day too. The year before I was born, my siblings' April Fool's Day prank was to use black electrical tape to tape down the buttons on the sink sprayer head. It was black plastic, so the electrical tape was unnoticeable, and they left it positioned right at the front of the sink, where someone would stand to wash dishes. When my mom turned it on in the morning to fill the coffee pot, she got blasted with a jet of cold water from the spray head and swore to find a way to get them back the next year. The April Fool's Day, my 8 months pregnant mom, pregnant with yours truly no less, had devised her way to get my siblings back. My due date was mid-April, so on April 1st, my mom waits for my dad to head out for work and for my siblings to get up to get ready for school. Suddenly, she grabs at her belly and starts hollering, "I think my water just broke. The baby's coming. It's coming." Cue 3 kids ages 7 to 12 running around panicking because my dad wasn't around to fix the broken water, and she had convinced them for a good half an hour that they were going to have to deliver me themselves because we don't have time to get to the hospital. The baby's coming now. She gave up the ruse in time for them to catch the bus, but from what I hear, they steered clear of April Fools pranking my mom from then on. All I know is if I was those kids getting up for school in the morning, and all of a sudden my pregnant mother was like, "The baby's coming, the water broke," I would be in such an unbelievable panic and a freak out moment. I mean, it's harder to get back at anybody, even harder than that, having them go through that experience. And our final story of the day is by Zerioi. I don't need protection. I probably shouldn't have done it, but it did feel nice. I work at a gas station and I get a lot of abuse from people, especially over wearing masks. Today I dealt with too much of it and my patiences were gone. This guy came in and right away I politely told him he needed to wear a mask. He of course rolled his eyes, zipped up his jacket and pulled it to where it barely covered his nose. I decided it wasn't worth it if he at least kept his face covered, but right away he let his jacket drop when my attention went back to my original customer. I told him to please cover his face, but he ignored me while being rude to my coworker. That's when I decided, okay, I'm gonna freak with this guy. So after my customer left, I started coughing just to see if I can get a reaction out of him. It took 3 rounds of fake coughing to get him to speak up. You're telling me to put on a mask, but you're over there coughing. You shouldn't be back there. I'm glad I was wearing a mask so he couldn't see my grin. Well, sir, I am wearing a mask, and if you were wearing one, you would be protected. He sure didn't like that. I don't need to be protected. I was in Iraq dodging bombs. Okay, sir. I was trying not to laugh. You think you're so funny? Why don't you come outside and fight me like a man? Nah, I'm good. Have a nice night. And he just stormed out saying something under his breath, not sure what. But it's funny how the mask didn't matter till it affected him directly. Although it's kind of a crappy thing to do because, in a way, it's a light way of threatening assault. But for people that refuse to wear masks, seeing that threat of coughing might make them consider, you know what, maybe I do want to wear a mask. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So if you have a favorite story of the day, let me know which story and why in the comments down below. But besides that, if you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like, and if you haven't, subscribe and turn notifications on so you'll never miss an upcoming video. No matter what you do, whether it's just viewing the video, liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, I appreciate the heck out of it. Every little thing that you do helps the channel grow that much more, and I can't thank you enough for it. So until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll be right here next time on the Storytime channel.